Late evening in March 2016, San Diego police dispatch channels erupted with urgent calls of gunfire, ripping through multiple streets. As officers raced toward Skyline, Lincoln Park, and Valencia Park, residents initially mistook the shots for fireworks until people started dropping and others fled for cover. Radio traffic quickly turned tense. Shootings were happening within minutes across distant blocks. Supervisors suspected the same vehicle was speeding through neighborhoods, hunting targets. At that moment, investigators had no clear picture, but the violence traced back months to a bitter rivalry between Deshaun, Christopher Dorsey, and Tyree Carter Jr. While outsiders often associate Southern California gangs with Los Angeles, San Diego's southeastern neighborhoods carried their own deep, violent history. Blocks like Lincoln Park, Skyline, Valencia Park, and Oak Park sat within miles of each other, yet operated under complex street codes. Loyalties ran block by block rather than citywide. The West Coast Crips, rooted in Lincoln Park, frequently clashed with blood-affiliated Lincoln Park purists. Rival colors claimed the same streets, even though families lived just blocks apart. Kids attended the same schools, shopped at the same stores, and played on the same courts. Yet tension always simmered beneath the surface. This was the world where the March 2016 shootings unfolded. During the mid-1980s, the explosion of crack cocaine markets across Southern California supercharged neighborhood rivalries in cities like San Diego. What began as loose groups of teenagers rapidly transformed into structured organizations obsessed with reputation, money, and swift retaliation for any sign of disrespect. As the decades passed, younger generations inherited these old feuds, disputes many barely understood but felt pressured to defend. Arguments born years earlier could suddenly reignite when fresh members stepped up seeking status and recognition. In this world, neighborhood pride operated like an unwritten code. Loyalty to the set ran deep, yet daily life still carried on with school, family dinners, and part-time jobs. Social pressure rewarded those who appeared fearless. Teenagers who confronted rivals earned street credibility that older members noticed closely before pulling them deeper into the fold. For kids growing up in Lincoln Park, Skyline, and surrounding areas, exposure to gang culture rarely started with serious crime. It began small and easy to miss. They hung around older members of neighborhood sets, gradually adopting the slang, clothing styles, and hand signs that signaled affiliation. No formal initiation was needed at first. The next phase involved running errands, serving as lookouts, or showing solidarity during tense moments with rivals. These small acts of loyalty carried serious weight. Older members watched who stayed solid under pressure, and that built respect on the streets. This was the environment that shaped young men like Deshaun Christopher Dorsey and Tyree Carter Jr. At that stage, neither had gained the deadly notoriety that would later fill police files and courtroom testimony. Street reputation also spread through music, local parties, and, by the early 2010s, social media. Instagram posts, rap lyrics, and YouTube clips showcased hand signs, neighborhood shoutouts, and subtle disses aimed at rivals watching online. What once stayed within physical blocks now traveled instantly across phones and neighborhoods. Investigators later noted that these digital exchanges accelerated conflicts far faster than old-school word of mouth. One disrespectful comment could ignite tension in minutes. Local rap scenes celebrated block loyalty, pushing ambitious teens to blend gang identity with their music and public image. While most posts remained bragging and light taunts, some crossed into dangerous territory, words that older residents immediately recognized as sparks that could start deadly fires. Even though most disputes started with insults or minor clashes, small disagreements could quickly grow into long-standing grudges once pride was involved. No one wanted to look weak in front of their peers. A heated argument outside a party or in a convenience store parking lot could drag on for weeks as rumors spread across blocks, eventually reaching people who felt obligated to respond. Over time, the original issue often became irrelevant. The real focus shifted to maintaining respect inside the neighborhood hierarchy. Retaliation usually followed, no matter how trivial the first spark had been. Detectives familiar with these cases describe the process clearly. Cycles of revenge rarely exploded overnight. Instead, they built slowly through repeated confrontations and simmering tensions. By early 2016, several of these feuds quietly boiled beneath the surface across southeastern San Diego. Most residents going about their daily lives had no idea that the pressure was about to erupt into one violent night. Law enforcement had maintained a constant presence in these neighborhoods for years, The San Diego Police Department's specialized gang units regularly monitored local street groups. Officers in the Southeastern Division conducted traffic stops, probation searches, and surveillance on individuals listed in the department's gang database. Certain names, including those of Deshaun, Christopher Dorsey, and Tyree Carter Jr., had already appeared multiple times in police reports long before the major violence. Court records later showed both men had prior contacts with law enforcement, but nothing hinted at the scale of what prosecutors would eventually describe in trial. Despite aggressive policing, detectives admitted it was nearly impossible to prevent every confrontation. Rival members often crossed paths unexpectedly around schools, parks, and apartment complexes. This uneasy balance between ordinary neighborhood life and underlying gang tension set the stage for the night when dispatch radios filled with reports of gunfire spreading across multiple streets. Long before their names echoed in courtrooms, Deshaun Christopher Dorsey's story was rooted in the same southeastern San Diego streets. Raised in the late 1990s and early 2000s around Lincoln Park and Skyline, his everyday life blended normal teenage routines with the constant presence of neighborhood sets operating near apartment complexes and recreation centers. Friends remembered a young Dorsey spending most afternoons outside on the blocks, listening closely as older guys discussed street politics. In environments where teenagers were constantly around individuals already tied to local gangs, the idea of neighborhood loyalty formed early through casual conversations, music blasting from parked cars, and stories of older members who had built fearsome reputations. That steady exposure gradually taught Dorsey that proving loyalty mattered more than staying away from street activity. Tyree Carter Jr.'s background followed a similar path through the same southeastern neighborhoods. Growing up surrounded by family and friends influenced by gang culture, he learned early that certain colors, hand signs, and phrases carried heavy meaning. As he entered his teenage years in the early 2010s, Carter began spending more time around older associates who claimed membership in the West Coast Crips set tied to Lincoln Park. He was drawn into circles where gang affiliation felt like a badge of belonging. Friends from that time described a young man eager to earn recognition among peers who valued confidence and loyalty far more than school or regular jobs. In neighborhoods shaped by decades of rivalry, many teenagers believed street reputation was the only real protection available. That belief quietly pulled Carter deeper into the lifestyle. Together, these two young men, shaped by the same environment of inherited feuds, street codes, and constant pressure, were heading toward a collision that would leave San Diego reeling. The early steps into gang affiliation for both young men rarely looked dramatic at first. Instead of sudden choices, the changes arrived through small, everyday moments. Deshaun Christopher Dorsey often spent afternoons hanging around older West Coast Crips members in Lincoln Park. They treated younger guys like little brothers, teaching them the slang, hand signs, and neighborhood history that carried real weight on those blocks. Tyree Carter Jr. moved through similar circles. Older associates introduced him to street routines, riding through neighborhoods, attending local parties, and staying alert whenever rival groups appeared nearby. Over time, these informal lessons created a quiet initiation process. Younger members slowly proved their loyalty during tense encounters, and older figures saw that as proof they deserved deeper involvement. In a culture that rewarded those who stayed solid under pressure, both Dorsey and Carter gradually earned acceptance. Peers respected toughness and consistency above everything else. As these relationships strengthened through the mid-2010s, stories about the two young men began spreading quickly across southeastern San Diego. Reputation traveled faster than any official record. Friends spoke of arguments at parties and confrontations near apartment complexes where Dorsey stood his ground against rival crews passing through the area. Carter's name surfaced in similar tales. Tense encounters outside convenience stores or parking lots where verbal challenges tested younger members before things cooled off. Many of these incidents never produced police reports, yet the rumors still shaped how the community viewed them. Street credibility grew as much from whispered stories as from confirmed events. Through this process, both men developed real recognition inside West Coast Crips circles. Their presence now carried heavier weight whenever neighborhood tensions rose. Eventually, their growing reputations caught the attention of law enforcement. San Diego Police Department gang units actively monitored suspected members across Lincoln Park and surrounding areas. Police reports from the mid-2010s documented several contacts, traffic stops, field interviews, and investigations tied to suspicious activity in southeastern neighborhoods. Though these encounters rarely led to major charges at the time, Each one added another entry into the department's gang intelligence databases. Detectives later explained that while these early stops didn't always prevent violence, the collected information proved valuable when serious crimes occurred. As Dorsey and Carter continued moving deeper inside West Coast Crips circles, their names climbed higher on the radar of officers watching the neighborhoods closely. During the same period, the bond between Dorsey and Carter grew stronger through shared friendships, neighborhood ties, and mutual loyalty to the set. The two were frequently seen together at local gatherings, house parties, and street corners. Younger members discussed rival crews, while older associates recounted past conflicts across southeastern San Diego. Both understood the same unwritten codes of loyalty and retaliation. Their friendship deepened through experiences that outsiders might see as simple socializing, but carry serious meaning inside gang culture. Friends later told investigators the pair often cruised together during late-night drives through Skyline, Valencia Park, and Lincoln Park, moves that boosted their status among watching peers. By early 2016, their partnership had become rock solid. When old tensions between rival groups began heating up again, Dorsey and Carter already stood side by side, ready inside a world where retaliation was often the expected response. Before long, those verbal confrontations started appearing during brief face-to-face encounters whenever members from different neighborhoods crossed paths around southeastern San Diego. Witnesses later described moments where groups exchanged sharp words inside parking lots or outside small stores, which occasionally pushed arguments toward the edge of physical violence before friends stepped in to separate everyone. In several cases, those encounters ended with threats shouted across the street, followed by cars speeding away while people continued recording the scene on their phones. Police officers from the San Diego Police Department responded to a few disturbance calls connected to those confrontations, although most incidents ended before officers arrived on location. Since none of those early disputes produced major injuries, the tension remained simmering beneath the surface rather than erupting immediately. Within circles connected to the West Coast Crips, conversations among younger members increasingly turned toward the idea that respect required a stronger response than words posted online. Friends later told investigators that certain individuals began discussing retaliation whenever they gathered during late-night hangouts across Lincoln Park territory, where people debated how rivals should be handled after weeks of disrespect. Those discussions rarely sounded organized or carefully planned at first, yet the repeated talk about defending neighborhood pride slowly shaped how younger members viewed the situation. As those conversations continued, the presence of firearms inside certain circles added another layer of danger that older residents quietly worried about but rarely spoke about publicly. Once guns entered the picture during heated discussions, the possibility of real violence moved from distant rumor towards something far more immediate. By early March 2016, that mindset had grown stronger among certain individuals who believed reputation demanded a response capable of restoring their standing within the neighborhood hierarchy. People inside those circles spoke about proving loyalty through action rather than conversation, which meant the pressure surrounding retaliation gradually intensified across several gatherings. Friends of Deshaun Christopher Dorsey, alongside Tyree Carter Jr., later described discussions where the pair appeared increasingly serious about defending their set after weeks of tension with rival groups. Although nobody outside those conversations fully understood what might happen next, the shift in attitude suggested that the situation had crossed beyond simple online arguments. As March continued unfolding across southeastern San Diego, the same neighborhoods that once carried ordinary daily routines now sat inside a quiet buildup where retaliation slowly transformed from talk into something far more dangerous. As March 2016 moved closer, conversations inside certain West Coast Crips circles began shifting away from talk toward preparation, which investigators later noticed through details that seemed ordinary at first but gradually revealed a darker direction. During that period, associates later told detectives that firearms started appearing more frequently during late-night gatherings around Lincoln Park territory, where younger members sometimes handled weapons while discussing neighborhood disputes already simmering across southeastern San Diego. Court records later indicated that both Tyree Carter Jr. and Deshaun Christopher Dorsey had access to guns during those weeks, which investigators connected to weapons eventually recovered during the case. Although firearms, unfortunately, circulated through several gang circles across the city long before this incident, witnesses later recalled noticing that the presence of those weapons around certain individuals had become more regular during the weeks leading up to the shootings. Once that shift occurred, conversations about respect and retaliation carried a heavier meaning since the tools capable of turning threats into violence already sat within reach. Around the same time, residents across southeastern San Diego began noticing unfamiliar cars moving slowly through neighborhoods during late evening hours, particularly near areas where rival sets sometimes gathered. Witnesses later described vehicles cruising along streets near Skyline Drive, Imperial Avenue, and residential blocks surrounding Lincoln Park, where occupants appeared to be watching street corners rather than simply passing through the area. In several statements given to detectives, residents mentioned seeing cars circle the same blocks more than once during certain nights, which raised quiet suspicion among people who understood local gang politics. Although those sightings alone did not immediately trigger police reports, neighbors familiar with the area later remembered feeling uneasy when those vehicles lingered longer than usual near gathering spots. That pattern of slow cruising across rival territory eventually became an important detail once investigators started reconstructing the timeline behind the shootings. Friends inside those same circles also began noticing subtle changes in mood among certain individuals connected to the rising tension across Lincoln Park territory. A few acquaintances later told investigators that Dorsey appeared more focused and serious during conversations about neighborhood disputes, which stood out since earlier gatherings often involved casual joking or music playing through parked cars. Others mentioned that Carter sometimes spoke about loyalty and defending the set with a tone that sounded less like conversation and more like a personal responsibility he felt obligated to carry. While those statements did not immediately alarm everyone involved, the shift still left an impression on people who later looked back at those weeks with a clearer understanding of what was developing. In many cases, friends assumed those comments reflected ordinary street talk rather than actual preparation for violence, which meant nobody realized how serious the situation had become. During those same weeks, officers from the San Diego Police Department continued focusing on routine patrol work across southeastern neighborhoods without recognizing that a larger event quietly approached. Detectives assigned to gang enforcement teams spent much of that time addressing unrelated investigations involving narcotics activity, probation checks, and smaller neighborhood disturbances that demanded immediate attention. Police reports from that period show officers conducting traffic stops and responding to minor calls around Lincoln Park, Skyline, and Valencia Park, which meant patrol presence remained visible across those communities. Despite that activity, no single incident pointed clearly toward the violent night that would soon unfold, since the earlier arguments between rival groups still appeared scattered rather than coordinated. As a result, law enforcement remained focused on everyday policing responsibilities, while tensions among younger gang members continued growing beneath the surface. As the second week of March arrived, several individuals within West Coast Crips circles gathered during late-night conversations where talk about respect slowly turned into discussions about taking action. Witness accounts later suggested that during one of those gatherings, the idea of driving through rival territory surfaced again, though this time the tone carried more seriousness than earlier conversations that treated retaliation like distant talk. Participants reportedly discussed moving through southeastern San Diego streets during late evening hours when fewer people remained outside, which would allow them to confront rivals or send a message across neighborhoods where disrespect had been circulating for weeks. Those discussions gradually formed the outline of a plan that relied on mobility, firearms, and the element of surprise across multiple locations. By the time the night of March 15, 2016, arrived across San Diego, the conversations that began as scattered arguments online had quietly transformed into a dangerous decision that would soon send police radios across the city erupting with urgent calls reporting gunfire. By the late hours of March 15, 2016, the streets across southeastern San Diego had already quieted down, yet a few residents remained outside near small gatherings, parked cars, and late-night spots that stayed open past midnight. Around that same time, witnesses later told investigators they noticed a vehicle moving slowly through certain neighborhoods, cruising along streets near Lincoln Park and Skyline in a way that did not match normal traffic patterns for that hour. The car did not speed through intersections or draw attention at first, yet people standing nearby remembered how it lingered near corners where groups usually gathered, almost like the occupants were watching rather than simply passing through. Since those streets had seen similar cruising before, during periods of tension, nobody reacted immediately, although a few individuals later admitted they felt something was off about how the vehicle moved through the area. That quiet observation would later become the first piece in a timeline that investigators carefully reconstructed once the violence began. As the vehicle continued through the neighborhood, It eventually approached an area near a liquor store where a small group of people stood outside talking, which created a moment that shifted everything from tension into actual violence. According to witness statements presented later in court, gunfire suddenly erupted from inside the vehicle, sending multiple shots toward individuals gathered near the street corner, without any warning or clear exchange beforehand. People who had been standing casually just seconds earlier immediately dropped toward the ground or ran in different directions, trying to escape the sudden burst of violence that cut through the quiet night air. Several witnesses later described hearing rapid shots that echoed across nearby buildings, which confused those who could not immediately see where the gunfire came from. Within those first moments, what had started as a slow-moving car passing through the neighborhood quickly turned into a shooting scene that left bystanders scrambling for safety. The confusion among people at that first location spread almost instantly as individuals tried to process what had just happened while still moving away from danger. Some witnesses initially thought the sounds might have been fireworks or something unrelated, yet that assumption faded quickly once they saw people running, dropping, or shouting warnings across the street. Others later told detectives that they heard screams mixed with the sound of tires as the vehicle accelerated away from the area, leaving behind a scene that shifted from calm to chaos within seconds. Since the attack happened without a confrontation visible to bystanders, many struggled to understand whether the shooting targeted someone specific or if it came as a random act of violence. That uncertainty added to the panic, since nobody could tell whether the shooters might return or continue moving through nearby streets. As quickly as the shots rang out, witnesses described the same vehicle speeding away from the scene, turning through nearby blocks before disappearing into the night. Several individuals provided descriptions to investigators about the car's movement, noting how it left the area with urgency rather than hesitation, which suggested the occupants had already planned their route through the neighborhood. Although some witnesses attempted to follow the direction of the vehicle visually, the darkness and speed made it difficult to track exactly where it went next. Those early descriptions later became important once detectives began linking multiple scenes together, since they noticed similarities in how witnesses described the same car appearing across different locations. At that moment, however, the vehicle had already moved on, leaving the first scene behind as residents began reacting to what had just occurred. Within minutes of the shooting, emergency calls started flooding into dispatch lines connected to the San Diego Police Department, where operators received reports describing gunfire near the liquor store and surrounding streets. Dispatch logs later showed that callers spoke over each other at times, trying to explain what they heard while still unsure about how many people were involved or whether anyone had been hit. As more calls came in, operators began gathering fragments of information about a possible vehicle connected to the shooting, although details remained unclear during those first few moments. Since reports of gunfire can sometimes involve isolated incidents, dispatch initially treated the calls as single scene while continuing to collect information from multiple witnesses. That approach would soon change as additional reports started coming in from other parts of southeastern San Diego. Patrol officers responded quickly once the first calls reached dispatch, with units from the Southeastern Division arriving at the scene within minutes of the shooting. Upon arrival, officers found evidence of gunfire, including shell casings scattered near the street, along with witnesses pointing toward the direction where the vehicle had fled moments earlier. While paramedics moved in to assist anyone injured, officers began securing the area to preserve evidence that might later help identify the suspects involved. Initial radio traffic from responding units indicated uncertainty about the full scope of the situation, since officers could not yet confirm whether this incident was connected to anything beyond the immediate scene. None of the officers present realized that this first shooting marked only the beginning of a series of attacks that would soon spread across multiple neighborhoods within a single night. Only a few minutes after officers secured the first scene, another call came through dispatch reporting gunfire in a different part of southeastern San Diego, which immediately raised concern among operators already tracking the earlier incident as patrol units redirected toward the new location. Witnesses there described a similar situation where a vehicle slowed near a group before shots suddenly rang out, leaving people scrambling for safety across the block. Since the timing between both incidents remained extremely close, supervisors monitoring radio traffic began considering the possibility that the same suspects were moving between neighborhoods rather than separate events happening. While details remained unclear in those early moments, the pattern already suggested something far more coordinated than a single isolated shooting. Residents at the second location later told investigators they noticed a car matching the same description given at the first scene, which reinforced the idea that one vehicle connected both incidents. Witnesses described how the car moved slowly before the gunfire began, then accelerated away immediately after shots were fired, following a pattern that detectives would later highlight during the trial. Although each witness provided slightly different details, the similarities between their accounts helped investigators connect the scenes once they started mapping out the timeline. Only a few minutes after officers secured the first shooting scene, another call came through dispatch reporting gunfire in a different part of southeastern San Diego. Supervisors monitoring radio traffic quickly began considering whether the same suspects were moving between neighborhoods. The timing between incidents was too close for coincidence. Officers now faced the possibility of an active threat still driving through the city. Residents at the second location later told investigators they noticed a car matching the description from the first scene. Witnesses described how the vehicle moved slowly before the gunfire began, then accelerated away immediately after shots were fired. Several people reported seeing flashes from inside the car, while others focused on the sound of rapid gunfire as they ducked behind parked cars or ran toward nearby houses. The similarities in their accounts helped investigators connect the scenes as they started mapping the timeline. Not long after those first two shootings, the violence reached Manomet Street. According to court records, a victim standing in that area was fatally shot, marking a turning point where the rampage shifted from multiple shootings into a confirmed homicide. Witnesses described hearing shots followed by immediate panic as people ran in different directions. Investigators later identified this incident as one of the most serious charges in the case against Deshaun Christopher Dorsey and Tyree Carter Jr. As news of multiple shootings spread through word of mouth, phone calls, and social media, fear moved quickly across southeastern San Diego. People began warning friends and family to stay inside. Because many neighborhoods were closely connected through family ties and friendships, information traveled fast even before official updates reached the public. That shared awareness created a deep sense of unease across Lincoln Park, Skyline, and Valencia Park. The situation grew even more chaotic when a gathering held in response to the earlier violence turned into another shooting scene. People who had come together to check on friends suddenly found themselves under fire. Not long after, another shooting occurred near a crowded hookah lounge where several people had gathered late into the night. Witnesses inside and around the lounge described hearing gunfire without warning, causing immediate chaos as people rushed toward exits or dropped to the floor for cover. The risk of multiple victims increased dramatically in such a crowded location. As the night continued, a group attending a house party suddenly found themselves caught in gunfire that arrived without warning. Music and conversation filled the space one moment, then shots disrupted everything. Several people reported diving behind furniture or running toward exits in confusion. Investigators later connected this scene to the same pattern, the suspects moving quickly between locations before anyone could fully respond. What started as one shooting had now touched multiple types of environments within a single night. By that point, emergency responders across San Diego faced an overwhelming situation. Units from the San Diego Police Department coordinated across radio channels while trying to track the suspect vehicle's movement. Although the speed of events made it difficult to establish a clear pattern in real time, ambulances moved between scenes transporting victims while officers secured each location and gathered witness statements. The scale of the response grew rapidly as more units joined the effort. What began as one shooting had turned into a citywide emergency. By the time the gunfire stopped, investigators faced a situation that stretched across multiple scenes. Crime scene technicians processed shell casings recovered from different locations, and early ballistics analysis soon revealed that several casings shared matching characteristics tied to the same firearms. Detectives later explained that this helped confirm the shootings were not separate events, but a single sequence carried out by the same individuals moving between neighborhoods. During that same night, surveillance footage from businesses near several shooting locations began playing a key role. Cameras positioned outside liquor stores, intersections, and nearby buildings captured parts of the vehicle's movement across different streets. Detectives spent hours reviewing footage from multiple angles, tracking a car that matched witness descriptions as it passed through areas shortly before or after gunfire was reported. In some clips, the vehicle appeared to be moving slowly before incidents. In others, it could be seen leaving quickly after shots were fired. While video footage provided movement data, witness statements helped fill in the gaps. Dozens of individuals from different neighborhoods spoke with detectives describing what they saw, heard, or remembered about the vehicle. Some focused on the sound of gunfire and its direction, while others provided details about the car's color, speed, or the number of people inside. As those accounts were organized, investigators noticed consistent elements that helped confirm the same suspects moved between each location. By aligning those details with dispatch logs and surveillance footage, detectives gradually mapped out a route connecting the first shooting to each subsequent incident. Within the San Diego Police Department's gang unit, officers began recognizing patterns that extended beyond physical evidence. Their familiarity with local street dynamics allowed them to interpret details others might overlook. Certain names began surfacing based on known associations, prior contacts, and recent activity within the neighborhoods. Officers considered who had access to vehicles matching witness descriptions, who had been involved in earlier disputes, and who had shown increased activity during the weeks leading up to the violence. That combination of street knowledge and investigative data helped narrow the list of possible suspects. The investigation gradually pointed toward two individuals whose names appeared repeatedly across different aspects of the case. Ballistics links, surveillance footage, witness descriptions, and gang intelligence all aligned toward Deshaun, Christopher Dorsey, and Tyree Carter Jr. Although the investigation still required additional confirmation before arrests, detectives had moved from uncertainty toward a focused direction. Following the night of the shootings, efforts to locate both men moved quickly across southeastern San Diego. Surveillance teams checked known addresses, spoke with associates, and monitored areas where the suspects were known to spend time. Both individuals had prior contact with law enforcement, which helped guide search efforts toward locations connected to their daily routines. When the arrests were carried out, officers approached with caution, believing the suspects had access to firearms and had already demonstrated willingness to use them. Law enforcement teams successfully detained Dorsey and Carter without any reported exchange of gunfire, bringing an end to the immediate threat. Once in custody, both suspects were brought in for questioning. Early interrogations involved investigators presenting certain details while asking each individual to explain their whereabouts. Both Dorsey and Carter denied involvement, offering explanations that investigators later compared against evidence collected from multiple scenes. Detectives noted inconsistencies between those statements and the timeline constructed from witness accounts, surveillance footage, and dispatch records. Although neither suspect provided admissions during early interviews, the conversations gave investigators additional information. Detectives also focused heavily on digital evidence. Both suspects carried phones that recorded valuable data about their movements and communications. Forensic analysis revealed location information placing them near several shooting scenes during the time frame of the rampage, directly contradicting claims made during questioning. Investigators also recovered messages and social media activity reflecting earlier tensions between rival groups. At the same time, forensic specialists continued examining physical evidence, particularly ballistics testing that compared bullets and shell casings across locations. Laboratory analysis confirmed that several casings matched firearms linked to the suspects. Investigators later testified that those ballistic matches connected multiple scenes to the same weapons, reinforcing the conclusion that the rampage involved a single coordinated sequence carried out by the same individuals. When the case moved into court, prosecutors laid out a timeline that stretched across multiple neighborhoods in San Diego. During opening statements, they described a moving vehicle traveling through southeastern San Diego, firing into different locations without warning. As they explained the sequence, prosecutors emphasized how the incidents connected through ballistics evidence, witness accounts, and digital data that placed both men at each location. By the end of opening remarks, jurors had a structured narrative framing the case as a coordinated rampage rather than unrelated acts of violence. As the trial continued, survivors from several scenes took the stand to describe what they experienced. Witnesses spoke about standing outside or attending gatherings when gunfire suddenly erupted, forcing them to run, drop to the ground, or help others who had been struck. Some described the initial confusion of not knowing where the shots came from, while others explained how quickly the situation turned dangerous once they realized the vehicle was firing into crowds. Those testimonies were grounded in specific details about locations, times, and actions. Eyewitness identification became another key part of the trial. Several individuals who had been present described the vehicle involved, along with the number of occupants inside. While not every witness could clearly identify faces, multiple accounts reinforced details about how the car moved, how the shots were fired, and how quickly the suspects left each location. Prosecutors used those consistent descriptions to strengthen their argument that the same individuals carried out each shooting. Defense attorneys challenged the narrative by focusing on inconsistencies within witness statements and questioning whether the timeline could definitively place their clients at every scene. They argued that nighttime conditions, stress, and confusion could affect how accurately people remember details. Lawyers also examined the sequence of events, attempting to highlight areas where timing between incidents might leave room for alternative explanations. Throughout the proceedings, the defense worked to separate individual pieces of evidence rather than allowing them to form one continuous story. Already established digital evidence played a major role in supporting the prosecution's case. Phone records placed both suspects near multiple shooting locations during the time frame of the rampage. Analysts explained how location data tracked movement across southeastern San Diego, aligning closely with the route reconstructed through witness statements and surveillance footage. Social media activity and prior messages also appeared in court, providing context about the tensions that had built up in the weeks before the shootings. That combination of digital records helped bridge gaps between physical evidence and personal testimony. When the case moved into jury deliberations, jurors spent time reviewing the extensive evidence, including forensic findings, witness testimony, and digital records. The process involved examining how each element connected to the others. After considering those details, the jury returned verdicts finding both defendants guilty on multiple counts, including murder and attempted murder tied to the events of that night. Those decisions reflected how the combined evidence formed a clear narrative that jurors found convincing. During sentencing, the court addressed the scale of the crimes by imposing extremely long prison terms that reflected the number of victims and the severity of the offenses committed across multiple locations. Judges considered the impact on victims, the coordinated nature of the shootings, and the broader consequences for the community. The outcome ensured that both Dorsey and Carter would spend decades in custody, effectively removing them from the neighborhoods where the events had taken place. With that decision, the legal process reached its conclusion. Although the effects of that night extended far beyond the courtroom in the months and years following the shootings, families of victims continued dealing with loss and trauma. Court outcomes provided answers without fully closing the emotional impact. Across neighborhoods like Lincoln Park and Skyline, residents remembered how quickly ordinary streets turned into scenes of violence. Within the San Diego Police Department, officers reviewed the case as part of ongoing efforts to monitor gang activity more closely across southeastern San Diego. Those reflections highlighted how tensions that build quietly over time can suddenly surface in ways that affect entire communities. The events from that night remain one of the most serious gang-related cases in the city's recent history, showing how local disputes can grow into something that reaches far beyond the individuals involved.